I need you to picture something for me right now. Just picture a piece of paper. A standard white 8.5 by 11 piece of paper.
Okay, I've got it.
Now picture a number written on that paper in bold ink. Let's say $400,000.
That is a very specific and a very large number.
It is. And for most people, that number is absolutely terrifying. It's completely abstract, feels like monopoly money, until suddenly you're sitting in a really cold office holding a pen and someone expects you to sign your name right next to it.
And you have that sudden realization of, oh, wow, I am actually promising to pay this back.
Exactly. Buying a home is, without a doubt, one of the first certifiably grown-up things a person ever does. It's this massive milestone. But let's be real here, it's also the exact moment where you feel the most like a fraud.
It is the imposter syndrome Olympics. You're absolutely right about that. It's a process where the price tag has so many zeros attached to it that a distinct psychological phenomenon just sort of kicks in.
The flight response.
Yeah, exactly. People just want to close their eyes. They want to sign the papers, ignore all the fine print, and just get it over with. They want the anxiety to start way more than they actually want to understand the deal they're making.
You just want to wake up, have the keys in your hand, and pretend the debt doesn't even exist.
Right.
But today, we're going to fight that urge. We're going to force our eyes wide open.
Which is really the only way to do it safely.
Right. We're doing a deep dive into Nolo's Essential Guide to Buying Your First Home. And look, I know that Essential Guide sounds a bit dry, maybe a bit academic, but the goal here is actually pretty radical. We want to move you from that state of high anxiety that I'm going to throw up phase to a state of complete empowerment.
And that empowerment doesn't just come from positive thinking or vision boards. It comes from competence. It comes from understanding that this isn't just about finding a place to sleep.
Anyone can find a place to sleep.
Exactly. This is about finding the right house at the right price, and this is the part that trips absolutely everyone up with the right loan.
The loan part is usually where my eyes glaze over, so I am really counting on you to keep me awake for that.
Yeah.
But before we get into the weeds, let's talk about who is actually guiding us today. We're looking at the combined wisdom of three authors here: Ilona Bray, Elena Schroeder, and Marcia Stewart.
Right.
Who are these people? Are they just, suits in a boardroom somewhere?
Far from it, which is exactly why I like this source material so much. They definitely have the technical chops. They have legal backgrounds, real estate backgrounds. But what makes them truly trustworthy is that they have very different, very messy personal experiences with home buying.
They aren't just preaching from a mountain.
No, they're in the trenches with you.
I really loved reading about that diversity of experience.
Yeah.
Because you've got one author who is living the absolute dream. She has a completely paid off 15-year mortgage. Done. Finished. The bank gets nothing else from her.
And now all that money that used to go to the bank every single month is funding her daughter's college tuition.
That literally sounds like fiction to me.
It does sound like a fairy tale, doesn't it? But it's real. Then you have another author who took a completely different path. She basically swallowed her pride and used family help to get a really low mortgage in an up-and-coming neighborhood.
She bet on the location.
She did. And the third author bought a starter home with an adjustable rate mortgage, which is a very scary phrase for a lot of people.
So the big takeaway right off the bat is that there isn't one correct way to do this. You don't have to have 20% down and a perfect credit score and a white picket fence to just get started.
Precisely. And it's not just their three voices either. They actually brought in an advisory board for this book.
Yeah, the advisory board is huge.
We're talking about 14 distinct advisors, mortgage brokers, real estate agents, home inspectors. So the source material we're unpacking today isn't just one single person's opinion. It is a consensus of professionals who have seen absolutely every mistake in the book.
Which is exactly what we need when we are talking about potentially spending $500,000. So here is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack the why. Is doing this actually worth it?
We have to establish that first.
Right. Then we're going to look at the what. What are you actually buying when you buy real estate? And finally, the how much, which is where the real pain is. We're going to bust the myths that keep people renting forever.
And we are going to give you a mental framework to help you find what you actually need, not just what those home makeover shows tell you that you need.
Let's start with the why. Because honestly, if you don't have a solid why, this whole process will just break you.
It really will. It's too stressful to do without a good reason.
Because renting is seductive. It really is.
Right.
Renting is easy. The dishwasher breaks. I just call the guy. The roof leaks. Not my problem in the slightest.
But buying, that is all on you.
If the toilet explodes at 3 in the morning, congratulations, you are now the plumber. So, sell me on this. Why would I voluntarily sign up for that kind of headache? Let's look at the financial argument first. We hear the word equity all the time, but let's actually unpack that. What does equity mean for the person listening right now?
Okay, the best way to think of a mortgage is as a forced savings plan. That is the simplest, most powerful way to view this entire transaction. When you pay rent, that money is effectively incinerated. It is gone.
Oof.
It pays for your shelter for exactly 30 days, and then it evaporates into your landlord's bank account. You will never, ever see that money again.
It's basically a subscription service for living indoors.
That is a great way to put it. But with a mortgage, you are contractually obligated to sock away cash every single month. Now, yes, a portion of that check goes to interest.
The bank's cut.
Right, but a portion goes to the principal. You are literally paying yourself. And unlike rent, you potentially get all of that money back when you sell.
And that is where equity comes into play. I feel like people use that word at dinner parties just to sound smart, but let's actually define it.
Equity is simply the difference between what your house is worth, which is the current market value, and the claims against it, which are your loans. It's the slice of the pie that you actually own, not the bank.
Okay, let's look at the Hugo example from the source material, because I really think seeing the math makes this click for people. I'm going to play the role of Hugo. I'm nervous. I'm buying my first place.
Okay, Hugo. Let's say you buy a house for $300,000. You worked hard and scraped together $30,000 for a down payment. That means you have to take out a mortgage for the remaining $270,000.
Okay, so on day one, I hand over my life savings of $30,000. I get the keys and I move in. What is my equity right at that moment?
Your equity is exactly $30,000. That's the cash you put in. The bank technically owns the rest of the value.
Okay, that seems fair enough.
Now, fast forward a few years. You've been making your monthly payments. You've slowly paid down the principal, the actual loan amount, to, let's say, $265,000. It goes down very slowly at first, but it does go down.
Right, because of interest.
Exactly. But at the very same time, the market value of the house has gone up. Let's say the house is now worth $310,000.
So the gap has widened in two different directions. I owe less money to the bank, and the actual thing I own is worth more.
Precisely. Your equity is now the $310,000 market value minus the $265,000 you still owe. That leaves you with $45,000 in equity.
Wait, hold on a second. I only put in $30,000 to start with. I haven't done anything except live there and pay my standard bills. How do I suddenly have $45,000?
That is the magic of real estate. And here is where it gets really interesting. This is the power of leverage. Hugo, you borrowed a very large amount of money, you paid a modest interest rate on it, but you get to reap every single bit of the gain yourself.
The bank doesn't get a cut of the appreciation.
Not a dime. The bank doesn't get the appreciation. They just want their original loan back, plus the agreed upon interest. You get all the growth on the asset.
That is actually kind of wild when you stop and think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I am using the bank's money to grow my own personal wealth.
Correct. It is one of the very few times in everyday life where debt actually works for you instead of against you.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. I am the nervous buyer, remember. Markets crash. We all remember 2008. What if the price goes down? What if my $300,000 house is suddenly only worth $250,000?
That is a very real risk. And the source material is brutally honest about that. Values fluctuate. The housing market is not a straight line up to the right. But if we look at historical trends, specifically the stat cited in the text from 1972 to 2005, existing U.S. home prices increased an average of 6.5% annually.
So the trend is upward over time.
Yes. History shows that houses rarely drop in value permanently. It is a long game. If you panic and sell right in the middle of a crash, you lose. But if you just hold on to the property, history says you will recover.
So it's definitely not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's more of a get-rich-slow scheme.
Exactly. And while you are getting rich slowly, you actually have a place to live. You can't live inside your stock portfolio.
That is a very good point. You can't host a Thanksgiving dinner inside your 401k. So you're building wealth through equity. But then there is the other favorite topic of adults everywhere, taxes. This is what the book calls the Uncle Sam bonus.
It really is a bonus. The government actively wants you to buy a house. They have practically rigged the tax code to incentivize homeownership. But before we start listing off the deductions, we really need to clarify a very important distinction that confuses a lot of people: the difference between a deduction and a credit.
Please do, because I feel like people use those words interchangeably all the time, and I usually just nod and pretend I know what's happening.
Think of it this way. A deduction is like a store coupon. It lowers the final price of the item you're being taxed on. A credit, on the other hand, is like a gift card. It pays the bill directly.
Okay, expand on that a bit. How does a deduction work in practice?
A deduction lowers your total taxable income. So if you make $80,000 a year and you have a $5,000 deduction, the IRS looks at you as if you only made $75,000. You are taxed on a smaller pool of money. It saves you a percentage based on your tax bracket.
Okay, so if I am in the 25% bracket, a $100 deduction actually only saves me $25.
Exactly right. But a credit is a dollar-for-dollar reduction in your actual tax liability. If you calculate everything and you owe the IRS $5,000 at the end of the year and you get a $1,000 credit, you now only owe $4,000. It wipes the debt away directly.
Got it. So credits are essentially gold, while deductions are silver. But homeownership offers a whole lot of silver.
It does. The big one, the absolute heavy hitter, is mortgage interest. This is especially huge in the early years of a fixed-rate mortgage.
Why the early years? Why does it matter when I pay the interest?
Because of how amortization works. Amortization is just a fancy banking word for how the loan gets paid back over time. In the beginning, the vast majority of your monthly check to the bank is just paying off the interest, not the loan itself.
Oh, right.
It's like pushing a giant boulder up a hill. You are sweating, you are paying every month, but the boulder, which is the principal, barely moves an inch.
That sounds incredibly depressing.
It is painful when you look at your debt payoff, but it is fantastic for your tax return because all of that interest, which usually amounts to thousands of dollars a year, is fully deductible. It slashes your taxable income significantly.
Okay, so mortgage interest is the big one.
Yeah.
What else do we get?
Property taxes. Those are deductible from your federal taxes. Points, which are those fees you can pay up front to get a lower interest rate, those are also deductible in the year you pay them. And depending on the specific tax year and current laws, even things like private mortgage insurance or PMI can sometimes be deductible.
And there is a mention of home offices and moving costs in there too.
Yes, though those come with very specific conditions. The IRS does not just hand those away. For moving costs, for example, the move usually has to be directly related to a new job that is more than 50 miles away. You can't just decide to move down the street because you hate your neighbor and then deduct the cost of the U-Haul.
What a shame. But the real granddaddy of them all isn't deduction you take every year, right? It's the one you get when you finally leave the house.
Capital gains relief. This is massive. It is arguably the single biggest tax break available to the middle class in this country.
Explain it to me like I'm 5.
If you buy a stock for $10 and you sell it for $100, you have to pay taxes on that $90 of profit.
Right.
The government always wants its cut of your gains.
Oh, right, capital gains tax.
But with your primary home, it's completely different. If you have lived there for 2 of the last 5 years and you sell it for a profit, you do not pay a single cent of tax on the first $250,000 of profit.
Wait, 0 tax, none at all.
0. And if you are a married couple filing jointly, that number doubles to $500,000. You can literally make $500,000 in profit on the sale of your house and keep every single penny of it legally.
That feels almost illegal.
It feels like a massive loophole, but it is the written law.
Yeah.
Imagine making $500,000 in the stock market and trying to tell the IRS you just aren't going to pay taxes on it. You would go straight to jail, but with your primary home, it's completely sanctioned.
It really highlights just how much the system is designed to encourage ownership. The government really wants you to be Hugo.
They do.
But let's pivot away from the math for a second. We've done the left brain stuff. Let's talk about the right brain, the vibe, the pizzazz, as the book calls it.
The personality factor, the psychological shift that happens.
Yes, because if you rent, you know the drill. You have white walls. You have that ugly beige carpet that you absolutely cannot remove.
Yeah.
You have the landlord's questionable taste in light fixtures, usually those cheap dome lights. You know the ones.
I know exactly the ones you mean.
You look at them every single day and you absolutely hate them, but you are powerless to change them.
There is a profound psychological shift that happens when you finally own the space. It is all about nesting. The source material shares the story of a buyer named Leah. Now, Leah was a very pragmatic buyer. She bought a place solely because she wanted a yard for her cats and a dedicated home office. Very practical reasons. She wasn't the emotional, white picket fence type of buyer at all.
But then what happened after she moved in?
She got hit by the nesting instinct hard. She completely surprised herself. She started measuring windows and putting up Roman blinds. She went out and bought a Christmas tree for the very first time in her adult life. It's that undeniable feeling of, this is mine. It fundamentally changes how you relate to your environment. You aren't just a guest passing through anymore. You are the host.
And it's not just about Roman blinds and paint colors. It's about stability. There's a really funny reference in the book to No More Mr. Roper.
A classic Three's Company reference for the older listeners out there.
Exactly. But it points to a very real fear that renters carry with them constantly. The fear of the landlord just deciding to sell the building out from under you, the rent hike letters sliding into the door on a Tuesday, the sudden eviction notice because they decided they want to move their nephew into your apartment.
It's that low-level, constant anxiety that you are living inside someone else's asset. When you buy, you trade the easy flexibility of renting for the security of absolute control. No one can ever tell you to leave, provided you pay the mortgage, of course. You can paint the living room walls black. You can knock down a non-load-bearing wall. You can adopt a Great Dane if you want.
So we have the solid financial reasons. Equity, tax breaks, we have the emotional reasons, stability, control, nesting. But there's still a lot of people sitting firmly on the fence. They have these scripts running in their heads.
Yeah.
I can't buy because fill in the blank.
All right.
Let's move to section 2 and bust some of these myths because these are the stories we tell ourselves just to stay safe and avoid taking the leap.
Let's do it. Let's break them down.
Myth number 1. I like renting. It's cheaper.
This is a very, very common one. And in the short term, looking at a single month's budget, it might actually look true. Your rent might be $1,500, and a mortgage for a similar place might be $1,800. So you look at the math and say, see, renting wins. But the counter argument the book presents is simple and brutal. Cheap is never as good as free.
Explain that one to me, because my rent is definitely not free.
Eventually, a mortgage ends. It might take 15 years, it might take 30 long years. But there is a definitive finish line. You make that absolute last payment, you get the deed, and you own the house free and clear. Your housing cost drops to just property taxes and insurance. Rent never, ever ends. It is a perpetual monthly expense until the day you die.
And there's a terrifying calculation in the source material about inflation that really puts this into perspective.
The 40-year calculation, let's scare the audience a little bit with this one. If you pay $1,000 in rent today, which, let's be honest, is a massive steal in most cities.
Which is pretty average for a small place years ago, yeah.
And we assume just a standard 4% inflation rate year over year.
A completely normal inflation rate.
In 40 years, that exact same apartment could easily cost you $4,800 a month.
Oof. $4,800 a month for the exact same beige carpet and the same dome lights.
Exactly. Meanwhile, if you had bought a home with a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, your principal and interest payment would be exactly the same in year 30 as it was in year 1. Your primary housing cost is essentially locked in time. Renting leaves you completely exposed to the whims of the markets forever.
That is a very sobering thought. But I want to be fair here. Are there valid reasons to rent? Or are we just bashing renters for an hour?
No, absolutely not. We aren't saying that everyone must rush out and buy today. If you are planning on moving soon, say in less than 3 to 5 years, renting is almost certainly better.
Because of the upfront costs.
Yes, the closing costs on buying and selling take real time to recoup through equity growth. If you buy a place and then sell it 2 years later, you will very likely lose money on the transaction fees alone.
Okay, so your time horizon really matters.
It's huge. Also, if you need extreme flexibility, like if you want to join the Peace Corps or travel the world for a year, renting is better. A house is an anchor. Or in some specific hyper-expensive markets, like downtown San Francisco or Manhattan, the rent-to-buy ratio might be so wildly skewed that renting and heavily investing the difference in the stock market actually makes more mathematical sense. But for most long-term residents in most normal cities, buying wins out over the decades.
Okay, let's look at myth number 2. I can't afford it. This is the big one. I don't have the money. I can't possibly save the down payment.
And this is exactly where we have to look at the spaghetti strategy.
I really love this story. It sounds completely miserable, but I love the lesson. Tell us about Karen and Alec.
So Karen and Alec were a couple looking to buy, and they were extremely nervous. The numbers were really tight for them. They were looking at their potential monthly budget and just seeing red ink everywhere. Their real estate agent looked them straight in the eye and said, "Look, if you want this house, you'll just need to eat spaghetti for a year.
Just straight carbs, no expensive sauce.
Maybe a little butter if they saved up for it. But the fundamental point was you might have to stretch yourself financially at the beginning." They depleted their savings to close the deal. They scraped by month to month. They didn't go out to nice dinners. They definitely didn't take any vacations. But the agent was entirely right. After a year, their finances stabilized.
Why did they stabilize? Did they win the lottery?
No, no lottery. They just got used to the payment. Lifestyle creep adjusts downward just as easily as it adjusts upward. Plus, they got small cost of living raises at work. The initial shock of the large mortgage payment wears off. The spaghetti phase is very often temporary, but people are so incredibly afraid of that one single year of financial hardship that they miss out on 30 years of equity growth.
It connects directly to the starter house concept too, right?
Yes, very much so. A lot of first-time buyers think they absolutely need to buy their forever home right out of the gate. They want the shiny granite countertops and the 4 bedrooms and the big yard immediately. They look at what their parents have right now after 30 years of working and saving, and they want that exact same lifestyle today.
I need a kitchen island or I'm simply not buying.
Right. But the goal is to just get into the market. You start with what you can actually afford today. Maybe it's much smaller, maybe it smells a little bit like old ladies, maybe it needs serious cosmetic work, but you buy it. And you let the equity build over time. That built-up equity is your literal ticket to affording the dream home later on. You trade up.
Okay, myth number 3. I'm single. This one is really personal for a lot of people. I should wait until I'm married. Buying a house is a two-person job.
This represents a massive demographic shift in real estate. More than 1/5 of all buyers today are single women. The Prince Charming myth is officially dying in the real estate world.
The book mentions a woman named Joanna.
Right. Joanna's perspective was brilliant. She said, why wait for Mr. Right to start building equity? She did the hard math. She realized that if she waited until she was married to buy, she might be missing out on 5, maybe 10 years of property appreciation. She simply didn't want her financial future to depend on her dating life.
I love that energy.
Yeah.
But what happens if Mr. Right does actually come along later? Now you have a whole house and a mortgage, and he has a futon and a roommate.
Then you have real options. Look at the story of Hannah and Chad from the book. They were two single people who both owned their own properties when they met. When they got married, they didn't panic about having 2 mortgages. They just rented one of the places out for income.
Nice.
Suddenly, there were landlords bringing in extra cash every month. Eventually, when the time was right, they sold both properties to buy a big family home. Having that real estate asset gives you massive leverage and options in a relationship, not baggage.
I like that a lot. Assets are sexy. Okay, myth number 4. It's too much responsibility.
This is the classic, I don't want to fix the toilet argument. I don't want to spend my weekend mowing the lawn.
Exactly. And honestly, on a rainy Saturday morning, I completely get that argument.
But it is a valid feeling. To a certain degree, buying a house is undeniably work. Things break. But renting isn't truly responsibility-free either. You still have the ultimate responsibility to pay your rent on time every month, or you get evicted. But the huge ownership advantage is control. If you own the house and the stairwell is creaky or the exterior paint is peeling, you don't actually have to fix it today.
Well, unless it's an immediate safety hazard.
Sure, if a pipe bursts, you fix it. But generally speaking, you get to prioritize. You control the maintenance schedule. You aren't at the mercy of some property manager's timeline. You can live with the ugly floral wallpaper for 5 years if you want to save money. You are the captain of the ship.
So we've handled the why and we've busted the big myths. Now we really need to talk about the where. Section 3, location, location, logic. Because I feel like people completely lose their minds when it comes to picking a location.
They absolutely do. Location is super tricky because people very often conflate a good location with an expensive location or a trendy location, but you really have to balance 2 distinct things, daily living and resale value.
Let's talk about daily living first, because you have to actually survive waking up in this house every day.
This is all about confronting your lifestyle reality versus your lifestyle fantasy. A rural, isolated farmhouse might look absolutely idyllic on Instagram. You picture yourself feeding chickens in the morning and drinking coffee on the wraparound porch.
Sounds amazing.
It does. But if you are a stay-at-home parent with a cranky toddler and the nearest grocery store is a 30-minute drive away, and there are no sidewalks to push a stroller on, that farmhouse quickly becomes a prison.
The silence gets really loud very quickly.
You have to match the neighborhood to who you actually are every single day,
Yeah.
not who you want to pretend to be on a lazy Sunday afternoon.
And then there is resale value. And the book specifically mentions something called the conformity principle. This sounds like some dystopian sci-fi rule, but it's actually really important for your wallet.
It is crucial. The conformity principle essentially warns against being the extreme outlier in any given neighborhood. You generally should not buy the biggest, most expensive house on the block.
Wait, really? Why not? Wouldn't you want to be the king of the castle?
Your ego says yes, definitely.
Yeah.
But economics says no. Because real estate values are inherently communal. If you buy a $500,000 house in a neighborhood where every other house is worth $300,000, your property value is actively dragged down by the smaller houses around you. It's incredibly hard for your house to appreciate because the comparable sales that appraisers use, just don't support your higher price.
Okay, so the lesson is, don't be the big fish in the small pond.
Conversely, the smallest, cheapest house in a really nice neighborhood gets pulled up in value by the surrounding mansions. The golden rule of real estate is you want to buy the worst house on the best block, not the best house on the worst block.
That makes perfect sense. Let the wealthy neighbors do all the heavy lifting for your equity growth.
Precisely. And the principle also means don't buy a house that is simply too unique.
Oh, we have to talk about the weird houses. The source material lists some absolute gems.
Yes, it does. The Gold Pyramid House in Illinois.
A literal pyramid, pleated in gold. Who wakes up one day and decides to build that?
Someone with a very specific, uncompromising vision and a lot of money. And then there's the Shoe House in Pennsylvania, literally shaped like a giant work boot.
And the converted water tower in Sunset Beach.
Look, these properties are really fun to drive by on a road trip. They are incredibly fun to stay in for a weekend as an Airbnb. But they are terrible for resale value because when you finally go to sell, you have to somehow find the one other person in the entire world who actually wants to live inside a gold pyramid. You are severely limiting your buyer pool to eccentric people.
So stick to the boring basics if you actually care about making money. Boring is good.
Yeah.
Now, how do we think strategically about location? How do we spot those up-and-coming areas before everyone else does?
You have to learn to play the where could I be in 5 years game. This brings us to the Diane story from the book.
Tell us about Diane.
Diane was a graphic designer. She was single and she didn't have a ton of money to work with. She found a small cottage with a completely disastrous yard, just a total mess. It was overgrown, full of junk, an absolute eyesore. Most normal buyers walked up, saw the chest-high weeds, and immediately walked away.
They just saw endless weekends of hard labor.
Exactly. But Diane had artistic skills and vision. She saw a blank canvas, she bought the place cheap, and she spent her weekends landscaping, using her design eye to completely overhaul the curb appeal. She didn't spend money adding square footage or a new roof. She just made the outside incredibly beautiful.
And what was the payoff?
She eventually sold it for enough profit to become a full-time property investor. She saw the hidden potential in the land that everyone else missed because they couldn't look past the trash. She lived 5 years ahead. That's the real key to location. You aren't just buying the house exactly as it sits today, you are buying its future potential.
I love that perspective. Okay, so we know generally where we want to be. Now we have to look at the menu. This is section 4. What specific type of home are we actually buying? Because it's not just standard white picket fences anymore. The sheer number of options is overwhelming.
The menu is extensive, yes. And the first big choice people usually face is the classic battle, old versus new.
Let's break that down. Old homes first. The charm factor.
Old homes really seduce you. You walk in the front door and you immediately see the original crown molding. You step on real hardwood floors that creak just a little bit with history. You see the thick, solid beams, and you're usually in an established neighborhood with giant oak trees that took 50 years to grow.
It feels like a real home, not just a drywall box.
Right. And very often, you get a much lower purchase price for the actual square footage compared to new construction. But
Here comes the inevitable but.
the but is the endless maintenance. Old houses are tired. The roof might be 20 years old and ready to leak. The heater is a relic from the Carter administration. And the actual layouts of the rooms can be very funky.
Funky in what way?
Small closets, for one.
Sure.
People in the 1940s apparently only owned 3 shirts and 1 pair of shoes. Tiny, cramped bathrooms. Kitchens that are completely closed off from the living areas by walls. These houses just weren't built for a modern lifestyle of 60-inch flat screens and big open concept living.
Okay, so you are buying unquestionable charm, but you're also buying drafty single-pane windows and high heating bills. What about new homes?
The pros are great. It's a completely blank slate. No one has ever lived there. No one has ever showered in your master shower. You get all the modern conveniences you expect. 3-car garages, master suites with walk-in closets the size of a small bedroom, and energy efficiency is a huge factor. Green building standards are standard now. Your monthly utility bills will be significantly lower.
Cons, what's the catch?
The price tag. You always pay a premium for new. It's exactly like driving a brand new car off the dealer lot. You pay for that new car smell. And you are often dealing directly with a corporate developer, not a regular homeowner, which can feel very impersonal. Plus, you might be living in an active, muddy construction zone for 2 years while they finish building the rest of the neighborhood around you. The sound of heavy machinery and jackhammers at 7 in the morning is definitely not charming.
Now let's pivot and talk about the big alternative to the single-family house. Condos, or CADs, common interest developments. This is for the person who desperately wants to own property, but absolutely hates the idea of mowing a lawn.
The core concept here is very distinct. You own the interior space of your unit, paint to paint, as they say in the industry, but the community collective owns everything else: the exterior walls, the roof, the community pool, the landscaping.
The pros seem pretty obvious. No yard work, usually a cheaper entry price, and maybe you get a nice gym on site. But let's talk about the thorns, the CC&Rs.
Covenants, conditions, and restrictions. These are the legally binding rules you agree to live by when you buy in. And if you are an independent, rebellious spirit, these rules will completely crush your soul.
Give me some of the horror stories. How specific do these rules actually get?
Incredibly specific. Pet weight limits are very common. Your dog cannot weigh more than 35 pounds, period. So if your golden retriever gets a little bit fat as he ages, technically he is in violation of the rules.
Putting the family dog on a diet just to keep the condo? That's rough.
They regulate curtain colors. Only white backing is allowed on window treatments. They want the entire building to look perfectly uniform from the street. Strict parking restrictions, absolute bans on hanging seasonal wreaths on your own front door.
Wreath bans.
Yeah.
That feels intensely personal. Like, who hates Christmas that much?
It's all about maintaining uniformity and property values. But you have to know yourself. You have to know if you are the type of person who can calmly handle receiving a warning letter just because you planted a tomato plant on your own balcony.
And then there are the financial fees, the dreaded monthly dues.
Monthly dues can be quite high, sometimes hundreds of dollars. But the real hidden danger is the special assessment. This is the absolute nightmare scenario for condo owners.
What exactly is a special assessment?
Let's say the condo board decides that the entire building needs a new roof. They get a quote, and it costs $100,000. They look at the Community Reserve Fund, which is savings account for the building, and they realize they only have $20,000 saved up.
Uh-oh. I see where this is going.
They don't just cancel the roof project. They take that $80,000 shortfall, divide it evenly by the number of units in the building, and send everyone a surprise bill. You could easily come home to a letter demanding $10,000 payable in 30 days.
That is genuinely terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move quickly through the others. Townhouses versus duplexes.
Townhouses are usually built in rows. You share a wall with your neighbor, but, and this is the crucial distinction, you usually own the actual piece of land underneath your unit. That's the main difference from a condo. You own the dirt.
In duplexes.
A duplex is simply a building with 2 separate units. The massive advantage there is income potential. You live in one side and you rent out the other side. It is a fantastic life hack for affordability. Your tenant is essentially paying half or maybe all of your mortgage.
And what about co-ops? The glamorous option. This feels very New York City to me.
Very New York, very Chicago. In a co-op, you don't actually own a specific piece of real estate. You own shares in a corporation, and that corporation owns the entire building. And those shares give you what's called a proprietary lease to live in your specific apartment.
It sounds incredibly complicated.
It is. It's much harder to finance because banks don't like lending money against corporate shares as much as they like lending against physical real estate. And the co-op board has immense, almost dictatorial power. They can demand to interview you, they can reject your application simply because they don't like your vibe, or they question your job stability, or they don't like your dog.
It sounds exactly like rushing an exclusive sorority, but for housing.
That's a great comparison. But it is often where the celebrities live. Jimmy Fallon, Madonna, they live in exclusive co-ops.
And finally, modular versus manufactured homes. This is an important distinction to make.
Modular homes are factory-built in sections, but they are permanently assembled on-site on a real foundation. Once it's put together, it's legally and structurally just a house. It appreciates in value like a normal house. Manufactured homes are the modern term for mobile homes. They are built entirely to federal HUD codes, not local building codes.
And what is the big warning there for buyers?
If you don't own the land underneath the manufactured home, like if you are just leasing a lot in a trailer park, the home itself tends to lose value over time. It depreciates exactly like a used car. That is a massive financial trap to avoid if your goal is to build long-term wealth. You always want to own the dirt.
Okay, we've picked out our ideal house type. Now comes the part of the show that makes absolutely everyone sweat. Section 5, the how much. This is where the rubber meets the road.
And this is exactly where most people make their first and sometimes fatal financial mistake.
You're talking about the multiplication game.
Yes. People take their gross annual income, multiply it by 2.5 or maybe 3, and confidently say, that's my housing budget. So if I make $100,000 a year, I can easily buy a $250,000 house.
Why is that dangerous?
Yeah.
It sounds like simple, logical math.
Because it's a wildly outdated napkin calculation from the 1990s. It completely ignores your current student loan debt. It ignores your monthly car payment. It ignores whatever the current interest rate happens to be. It ignores the fact that you really like to eat expensive sushi 3 times a week. It can easily lead you straight into bankruptcy. You need to look at PITI instead.
PITI. It sounds exactly like pity, which is frankly what I feel for my checking account right now.
You know, let's spell that acronym out.
Okay. P is for principal. That is repaying the actual loan amount itself. I is for interest, the cost of borrowing the bank's money. T is for taxes, property tax, which can easily be thousands of dollars a year depending on your state. And the last I is for insurance, hazard insurance, fire protection, liability. And usually, you don't pay all these bills separately, right? You just write one big check to the mortgage company.
Right. The lender sets up something called an escrow account. Think of it as a forced piggy bank managed by the bank. They take the T and the I portions of your payment every single month, they hold them in this account, and then they pay the taxman and the insurance company on your behalf when the bills are due.
Why do they do that? Are they just trying to be helpful?
Banks are never just trying to be helpful. They're fiercely protecting their collateral. If the house burns to the ground and you forgot to pay the insurance premium, the bank loses its entire asset. If the government seizes the house for unpaid property taxes, the bank loses. So they simply do not trust you to remember. They collect the money up front and pay the bills themselves to ensure their investment is completely safe.
That makes a lot of sense. It's very paternalistic, but I get the logic. Now, let's talk about the dreaded down payment. The golden rule we always hear is 20%.
That is the standard traditional advice. If you manage to put 20% down, you completely avoid private mortgage insurance, or PMI, which is basically a secondary insurance policy you are forced to pay for just to protect the bank in case you default on the loan. It does absolutely nothing for you. It's just wasted money.
But 20% of a normal $400,000 house is $80,000. That is a staggering amount of cash. You could buy a luxury car with that.
It is a huge hurdle, and the book makes it very, very clear. You do not have to hit 20% to buy a home. In fact, most first-time buyers don't even come close to that.
Tell us about the guy in the book named Ben, because Ben sounds like an absolute maniac.
Ben is a fascinating example of creative financing and having an incredibly high risk tolerance. He wanted to buy a place right before he got a big promotion at work. He actually managed to secure a 103% loan.
Wait, a 103% loan?
Yeah.
He borrowed more money than the house actually cost? How is that even legally possible?
It was a very special, specific loan program. He put absolutely zero down payment, plus he borrowed extra money on top of the purchase price just to cover all his closing costs. He walked into that new house with $0 out of his own pocket.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It was phenomenally risky. If the housing market had dropped even 1% the next month, he would have been instantly underwater on the loan, meaning he owed more than the house was worth. But it worked out for him. He got his promotion, the house value went up over time, and he refinanced to a normal loan later. The story just illustrates that flexibility really does exist if you are willing to hunt for it and take on the risk.
If we do decide we want to put some money down, where does it realistically come from, besides buying a winning lottery ticket?
Personal savings, obviously. but also what we call the bank of mom and dad. Gifts or personal loans from family members are incredibly common in real estate. There is absolutely no shame in utilizing family help if it's available to you.
And the book says you can raid your retirement accounts.
Raid is a pretty strong word, but yes, you can access those funds. The IRS allows you to withdraw up to $10,000 completely penalty-free from an IRA if you're a first-time home buyer, or you can take out a loan against your own 401k balance. The interesting part there is you actually pay the interest back into your own account.
And then there is my absolute favorite strategy mentioned, the wedding trick.
This one always gets a reaction, skipping the massive, expensive wedding to fund the house purchase instead.
Just telling all your guests, hey, enjoy the casual backyard barbecue because this new house is our actual wedding gift to ourselves.
Prioritizing the appreciating asset over the 6-hour party is a completely legitimate financial strategy. A $30,000 wedding lasts one evening. A $30,000 down payment changes your financial trajectory for a lifetime.
Before we leave the terrifying money section, we have to mention the hidden costs because it's never just the down payment.
Closing costs. These will completely blindside you at the finish line if you aren't prepared for them. They typically run between 2% to 5% of the total purchase price. This money pays for the couriers, the title insurance policies, the county filing fees, the real estate attorneys. On a $300,000 house, that could easily be another $15,000 you need in liquid cash on top of your down payment.
That is brutal. And what about points?
Points are notoriously confusing. Basically, it's just prepaid interest. You choose to pay 1% of the total loan amount upfront in cash, that's called 1 point, to buy yourself a lower interest rate for the entire life of the loan. It's a calculated trade-off. Pay more cash today, pay less in monthly interest for the next 30 years.
And finally, you have to have the oh, no fund.
Yes, you need cash on hand for moving trucks, for setting up your cable and internet. And the spaghetti fund, which is cash set aside for the immediate, unexpected repairs that always pop up the very first week you move in. Because I promise you, something will break. The water heater somehow senses when the deed is signed, and it just waits for you to move in before it dies.
Okay, we know the why, we know the what, and we know the terrifying how much. Now we really need a plan of attack. Section 6, Tools for the Hunt. The book talks about creating a dream list, and honestly, this sounds like the exact part of the process where couples end up breaking up.
It absolutely can be a relationship test. The dream list is an actual physical worksheet provided in the back of the book, and its main purpose is to force you to relentlessly separate your must-haves from your would-likes.
What's the real difference? Because I feel strongly that I must have a hot tub in the backyard.
You don't. A must-have is strictly non-negotiable. For example, I must have 3 bedrooms because I have 2 kids and they literally cannot sleep in the bathtub. A would-like is, I would like shiny granite countertops. You can easily add granite countertops later when you have more money. You cannot easily add a 3rd bedroom to a 2-bedroom house.
And then there are the deal breakers.
These are the critical things that make you turn around and walk away instantly no matter how nice the kitchen is. Terrible natural light, being located on a busy, noisy street, signs of toxic mold, finding out there's a sex offender registry right next door.
The book strongly emphasizes doing this worksheet with your partner, but doing it completely separately first.
That is crucial advice. If you sit down and fill it out together, the louder, more dominant personality usually just takes over. One person says, oh, we don't really need a garage, and the other person just agrees to avoid conflict, even though they secretly, desperately want a garage. If you fill it out separately, and then compare your lists over a glass of wine, you might be shocked to find out that your partner's absolute must-have is something you put down as a don't care.
Much better to have that fight at your current kitchen table than screaming in the driveway of a house you just toured.
Exactly. Sort it out before you involve a real estate agent.
Let's end this section with Hope's story, because it really perfectly illustrates how this list works in actual reality.
Hope was a buyer who had a very specific, stubborn aesthetic in mind. Her absolute must-have was a cute, historic craftsman bungalow. She wanted the vintage charm, the big front porch, the historical details. That was the dream she couldn't let go of.
But then reality hit.
But when she really sat down and looked honestly at her daily lifestyle, her long, exhausting work hours, her high anxiety about personal safety, and her complete inability to fix anything mechanical, she had a revelation. She realized her actual must-haves were low-maintenance living and high security. The old craftsman was going to be a massive money pit and a constant source of stress.
So what did she end up buying instead?
She bought an architecturally boring modern townhouse in a secure complex.
And was she actually happy with it? Or did she resent giving up the dream?
She was absolutely thrilled because the house actually fit the reality of her life, not just her fantasy. She realized that cute wasn't a must-have, it was just a would-like. Safety and having free time on the weekends not spent sanding old floors, those were her true must-haves.
That is such a powerful and grounding lesson. You have to marry the actual house, not just the glossy photo of the house. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've gone all the way from the sheer panic of looking at that huge price tag to the nuts and bolts of building equity, exploiting tax credits, and surviving the horrors of strict HOA rules.
We have looked over the entire menu of housing options and faced the brutal reality of the hidden costs. We have eaten a whole lot of metaphorical spaghetti today.
So if we try to boil this all down, buying a home isn't really just a financial transaction. It's a psychological journey from asking, can I actually do this? To asking, how do I actually do this?
Exactly. It's about carefully balancing the emotional dream of homeownership, the painting the walls, the buying the Christmas tree, the nesting instinct, with the cold, hard, unfeeling financial reality of PITI and closing costs. It involves choosing a future lifestyle just as much as you are choosing a physical structure to live in.
And I want to leave our listeners with one final, slightly provocative thought to chew on before we go. Let's hear it. We spend so much of our time obsessing over what we want right now, in this exact moment. I want a dishwasher today. I want a dedicated parking spot today. I want to be walking distance to the cool bars. But when you sign that mortgage paper, you are actually making a massive financial bet on your future.
You are. You are planting a very expensive flag in the ground.
So take a minute to reflect on your future self. You aren't just buying this house for who you are today, the nervous renter eating takeout on a hand-me-down couch, afraid of making a 30-year commitment. You are buying this house for who you could potentially be in 5 or 10 years. The avid gardener, the new parent, the savvy real estate investor, the confident person who actually knows how to fix a broken fence on a Saturday morning.
That is a really great perspective to keep in mind. You have to ask yourself, is your deep fear of that large monthly mortgage payment actually just a disguised fear of growing up and taking on real responsibility?
That is the million-dollar question.
It really is. And how you answer that question might just determine whether you reluctantly renew your apartment lease for another year of staring at beige carpet, or if you finally pick up the phone, call an agent, and start the process.
Get your finances in order, folks. Do the hard math. Fight the fear with solid facts and preparation, and then go out and find that home. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See y'all next time.